Oh, it's recording. Yes. Putting out a video after like a few months. I haven't put out a video on this channel in a really long time, period, let alone a technical music production video. So I'm excited to be back here. I'm hoping I can do some more of these. I hope you guys are doing well. Got a new place, got a new job, got a new setup. So, you know, new year, new me. 2020 has absolutely sucked. So let's talk about how I mix my lead vocals. Quick disclaimer. Some people are going to come in here with limited music production knowledge. They might see this and think, damn, that's cool. I like the way that sounds. I'm going to take a carbon copy and put it on my stuff and it'll sound the same. On the flip side of that, somebody might come in here and say, this dude is doing everything wrong. This is not how you mix vocals. And neither of them are correct, or both of them are correct. There is never a one-size-fits-all solution in music. There never is. You know, it depends on the singer. It depends on the mix. It depends on day to day. It changes. So take this with a grain of salt. Maybe there's an aspect of this that you like. Maybe there's something you didn't know about. You can apply it to your tunes. I am not saying that this is objectively the way or not the way that you should be mixing your vocals. With that being said, we're going to listen to what we're going to be mixing today, and it's going to be my new track eventually that I just put out with Atlas in Motion, link in the description to Spotify. So let's just take a listen to it as is, if you haven't heard it, and hear what the vocals sound like in the first verse.
Friday night, all my friends getting high. See all the texts, but I never reply. Cause it sucks to be caught in your head and convinced that you're all alone.
So that's the quieter intro section, then we'll get into a little bit higher, octave up.
Drugs can only get so much, so I'm sorry if I'm breaking our communication, but we are all just quick to judge, so I think that I'll just keep my mouth shut. There's gotta be some people who are just like me. We toss and we turn.
All right, those are the vocals. So let's break it down a little bit. And the first thing that I want to talk about, well, firstly, this was recorded 1.5 years ago. And there's definitely a few things, you know, when you sit down to record a vocal, there's a few things that I would have changed physically with the technique of where the microphone is placed, how much water I had that day. Apples help a lot to get rid of that lip smacking sensation that I despise, but I have it all the time because I'm dehydrated all the time. So there's a few things that I would have changed definitely that can be fixed after you record, but it's easier to mitigate those things before you do the physical recording. Regardless, let's talk about gain staging. So the first thing is when you go and turn up your gain on your microphone, how loud does that need to be? I've done a video on it, got that link in the description as well. Check it out. So I'm assuming that you've got the proper gain on your microphone. So let's look at what my gain is. If I take off all of these effects and I take off the automation, the volume automation, which we'll talk about in a second, let's look down here in the bottom left at this green number. This is the peak RMS, and let's see what we get. Now, in the gain staging video, I talk about -15 to -12 being that peak sweet spot. So -24, that's soft. Something I probably would have changed.
Drugs can only kill so much, so I'm sorry if I'm breaking our
Okay.
communication, but we are all just quick
-7 peak, or -17. However, if I looked at an average of those peak values, I think it's a little too soft. That's okay. Let's move on. I'd rather have it too soft than too loud, and then we can't dial back on it. We can always add more. Let's talk about automation. So the first thing that I would recommend, this song doesn't have a lot of it, but this is volume automation. And so, you know, before we get into compression and all that stuff, you know, you're going to have parts of your song where you're singing louder, just naturally. And sometimes it helps to add a little bit of volume reduction in those parts just to make it a little bit more even and smooth. So I've done a tiny bit of that here before adding any effects. Again, it's tiny. Definitely just something to think about. You can see the peaks and valleys here. So now we've got that volume automation on. It's not going to make that much of an audible difference. So we're not going to go back in and listen to that right away. Now, coming to the signal chain on the main vocal. The first thing I have added is UAD. I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Antares Autotune. Now, we all know you don't need to be a big time producer to know that too much of something is not good. So I like to use Autotune, just a tiny, tiny bit to help with those imperfections. It's great. This real-time Autotune advanced, it's awesome. It's got this humanize function. Couldn't tell you what it does internally, I can tell you that it sounds a little bit more natural. My retune speed here is set to 10 milliseconds, which is really, really fast. If I got rid of the flex tune and the humanize, it would sound like a little bit of a robot, but let's listen to it with that.
Friday night, all my friends getting high.
And you can see how much I'm off
text, but I never
tune.
reply. Cause it sucks to be caught in your head and convinced that you're all alone.
So now that we're listening to it without all the effects, you can hear it's definitely softer and it's a little bit more
So
muted.
much for self-improvement, I still feel so mean, but I'll get
Cool, sweet. That's Autotune. Again, you don't need a fancy Autotune. Any Autotune will work. This Autotune comes with my Universal Apollo interface. So it's a plugin, but it's from that package. Moving on, let's talk about EQ. Now, EQ is extremely important. Don't be afraid to have more than one EQ. Don't be afraid to play around with some extreme things and then dial it back until you find a spot that you really enjoy. I'm using the default stock Logic EQ. So let's just take a look at what I've done here. We're starting with the low end. We've got a high pass filter coming up to about 95 hertz. And I have a very muted low end bassy voice that I don't really care for. I kind of like it when I'm just talking, but like when I'm doing this, the music stuff, I want to roll off some of that low end because I don't like the way that it sounds. And to be honest with you, the EQ is really all about carving out this space for each instrument, your voice, the guitar, the bass, and every instrument has its own place in this frequency spectrum. Again, this is definitely not a one-size-fits-all solution. So that's what I've done. We can take it on and off and see what it sounds like.
Cause it sucks to be caught in your head and convinced
Take
that
all
you're
of them off,
all
actually.
alone. And I've been working on myself since I was 17.
Again, you're not going to hear much of a difference.
I still feel so mean, but
Let's move on to a low shelf. Honestly, kind of don't know what I was doing here. I could have just pulled that high pass up a little bit more. I guess it flattens that out a little bit between the 100 and 200 range, but it's not that big of a difference. 100 is considered, bassy. We get into the 200 to 500 range, and this is where we get sort of that muted tone that we often cut in vocals because we don't want it. I've made a tiny, tiny cut at 200 here. That's just what I did.
And I've been working on myself since I was 17. So much for self-improvement.
And again, at 500, although these sorts of cuts, honestly, on these lead vocals, probably wouldn't make that big of a difference.
Because the drugs can only kiss some.
Now, there's quite a boost at 1.4, and so this is with the male vocals, this is sort of the main portion of a male vocal, and this is a part that I wanted to accentuate for sure. So I've done that. Again, just tiny, tiny, minute changes, and then a boost here, a 6 dB boost at 4800 hertz. Again, this is not a correct way to do something. This is just how I like it in this recording.
Because the drugs can only kiss so much.
It's going to sound.
So I'm sorry if I'm breaking our communication, but we are all just quick to judge.
It's harsh. It's harsh because I boosted 6 dB in these ranges of sibilants where we get the p and the s. So it's going to be harsh, and we will address that a little further on down the mix. Now, as you can see in that EQ, I was adding and subtracting gain at different frequencies. Oftentimes, I would recommend, I didn't do it here, bad practice, adding another EQ to purely subtract, to find frequencies that might be problematic and just subtract them. Don't add anything. Something that I would, if I was to go back and remix this, I'd probably add that in there. Just another EQ where I'm subtracting instead of adding and subtracting. Now let's look at the first in a host of compressors. And this one is a limiting amplifier. So I'm using it as a compressor in this instance. And the purpose for this compressor is to just get a little bit off the top. We're not talking, a lot of heavy compression here. This vocal is absolutely over compressed, but this is just light compression here.
Get there eventually.
You can see on the meter, we're getting about negative 3 dB of gain reduction.
So I'm sorry if I'm breaking our communication.
Negative 7
but we are all just quick to judge.
at its highest points.
So I think that I'll just keep my mouth shut.
Negative 7 is not necessarily light compression. That's quite heavy compression on those loudest parts, trying to get a more even vocal. So that's that one. Next, we've got an LA2A, and this is another
compressor. These are both Universal Audio plugins. And let's listen to this one.
Cause the drugs can only kiss so much. So I'm sorry if I'm breaking our communication, but we are all just quick to judge. So I think that I'll just keep my mouth shut.
So you'll notice this one got immediately a lot louder. There's quite a bit of gain on this compressor. And if you've been looking down here at the levels, we were once at -24, -17, and now we're up
Cause the
to
drugs can only kiss so much.
-12.
So much. So I'm sorry if I'm breaking our
However,
communication, but we are all just quick to.
Even though we're up at a higher volume, it's a more even sound. It's more even because of these compressors that we've been putting in parallel.
Cause the drugs can only kiss so much. So I'm sorry if.
You get the idea. We're adding little bits of compression here and there so that we're getting a more even sound. Now, you're going to start to hear some hissing in the background of these recordings. And something that's, I think, kind of important to talk about is your noise floor, the signal to noise ratio. So as you turn up the gain on your microphone, there's going to be electrical noise that is happening in the background. And it's also picking up environmental noise as well. We often talk about the signal to noise ratio on more expensive, nicer mics, better preamps is better. So you can boost up that gain a little bit more without getting the hissing noise in the background. For the life of me, I can't figure out why I have so much hissing. It's honestly in my setup. It's something that I need to look at, but you're going to start hearing a little bit more of that hissing. So that's something to think about, as you're listening to your recordings.
Improvement, I still feel so mean, but
You can hear it. It's just ambient noise in the background. Moving on, let's go on to the next plugin, which is Nectar III. Now, this is a suite by iZotope. So there's actually 3 plugins within this. However, all of the plugins within here you could get with stock plugins as well. The first being a compressor. And so this is let's just take a look at it.
cause it sucks to be caught in your head and convinced that you're all alone.
Here's the
And I've been
compression.
working on myself since I was 17. So much for self-improvement, I still feel so mean, but I'll get there eventually.
This is definitely overcompressed, 120%. I thought that overcompressing would help with that sort of hissing noise floor, and it actually makes it worse. So we're compressing at the highest points, -7 dB worth on top of the -7 and the -3 that we got from the past 2 compressors. So there is a lot of compression going on in this track. Moving on, let's look at the Deesser. Now this is probably the most important thing in this chain, and this is getting rid of those harsh sibilances that we heard from the EQ.
Cause it sucks to be caught in your head and convinced that you're all alone. And I've been working on myself since I was 17. So much for self-improvement, I still feel so mean, but
Turned off.
I'll get there eventually.
Let's turn it back on.
Cause the drugs can only kiss so much.
So this is kind of creating what I like in this vocal, and it's not super harsh on the high end. Specifically in the first part of the verse where the instrumentals are just a guitar, I kind of like that tone, to be honest with you. And so this actually has a cool feature where you can listen to what it's cutting out. And this is our threshold. So anything past this line above 7,000 7,000 hertz is going to be cut down, and we can see how much it's cutting down right here. It's terrible to listen to, but I like it. I like it because it tells me what it's doing. Again, this is to taste. You might not like the way that sounds, and that's perfectly fine. I, however, enjoy it, and so that's where I left it. And so we are given this.
So I'm sorry if I'm breaking our communication, but we are all just quick to judge.
Sweet. There's another harmony effect on here, but it's not actually engaged. I'll show you why a little bit later. All right, let's move on to breath control. This is another tool from iZotope.
In your head
And this is,
convinced that
you'll
you're
hear it and
all
see it.
alone. And I've been working on myself
Very
since
subtle.
I was 17. So much for self-improvement, I still feel so mean, but
What it's doing is pretty self-explanatory. It's turning down my breaths, which there are a lot of because I eat this microphone when I sing.
specifically back then. So this is giving us a target level that we want those breaths to be at and a sensitivity, how much it's going to pick up. And then that blue line there is when it's actually coming in, you can hear it.
Since I was 17, so much for self-improvement. I
Turns down my breath. I'm going to disable that because it takes up a lot of my memory, or it takes up a lot of my processing power, excuse me. So let's move on to reverb. Again, something that maybe I would have changed a little bit. Reverb is just like Autotune in the sense that you don't want too much of it, but you know, a nice touch of it can help.
Friday night, all my friends getting high. See all the texts, but I never reply. 'Cause it sucks to be caught in your head and convinced that you're all alone.
This is a 3.6 second reverb in a hall. Pretty long. Honestly, pretty long. I'm supplementing that with the fact that it's only negative 33 dB of gain on the wet side, and it's full dry. So this is the vocals without the reverb, and then this is the pure reverb. So let's listen to what it would sound like if there was no dry vocals. Sounds like you're in a church. Again, perhaps a shorter reverb for this in combination with this longer one, turned down a little bit, might be a better option. I just kind of like the way it sounds, to be honest. That's all there is to it. I mean, that's all there is to it with any of this stuff.
So much for self-improvement, I still feel so mean.
So there's our finished lead vocal. Now, there's a little trick that I've seen on YouTube and that I've sort of learned, and that is adding dubs on the left and right, fully pan left and right to sort of help with the spatialization of the vocal and get it all around you. So let's listen to it and let's turn it up.
See all the text, but I never reply. 'Cause it sucks to be caught in your head and convinced that you're all alone.
So if you have headphones on, you're going to notice that there's a little bit of a delay between the left and the right. And that is because this is actually a straight copy of the lead vocal. Normally, so you can do it two ways. You can either take a copy of it and move it just a few clicks forward or behind, probably forward of the vocal, so that they're not perfectly lined up. Because if you have multiple recordings of the same vocal lined up, you're going to run into phase issues and they're going to start canceling each other out. So there's a little bit of a delay so we can get that spatialization. Because if it happens here and then it happens here and then it happens here, it sounds like it's all around us. So these are literally just copies of that same vocal. Now what I've done, let's look at this one. This one is panned down here. We can see it's panned fully to the left. It's got Autotune. It's got more Autotune than the other ones because it's really soft, so I turned it up. It's got an EQ, very similar to our prior EQ, except it's got more of a cut down low, because at the wide left and wide right, oftentimes when that's down mixed to mono, we don't want a lot of lower frequencies out here because it's going to muddy the rest of your mix. And then we've also got the Deesser, the breath control. But the thing with this is we've got a pitch shift. So this pitch shift is actually turning the pitch down by -5 cents, which is not very much. However, when we pair that with the track that's on the right side, we've pitch shifted this one up 5 cents. So we've got -5 on the left and +5 on the right. So it gives us a little bit more spacing, so these don't sound exactly the same. Let's add in the main vocal.
'Cause it sucks to be caught in your head and convinced.
Now these are obviously turned up a lot louder than they were in the real song, so we can hear the effect.
I've been working on myself since I was 17. So much for self-improvement, I still feel so mean, but
cool. That's it for these lead vocals. I'm going to turn this down and let the song play a little bit.
So I'm sorry if I'm breaking our communication, but we are all too quick to judge. So I think that I'll just keep my mouth shut.
Listen to pre-chorus.
There's gotta be some people who are just like me. We toss and we turn, but we can be set free from the walls that enclose us and hide our disclosures. Oh, just a sad situation, breaking our communication.
In the chorus, we have some more background vocals, but we can get to that in another video. That is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope I didn't go too quickly, and I gave you a little rundown on how I edit my lead vocals. And so this is a pretty similar process for everything, for covers and for original tunes. Obviously, things are different for every song. It really depends on, day by day, track by track. So hope you guys enjoyed. please take a second to check out the new song down in the description, the one here. And I will see you guys soon, and have a great rest of your weekend.